The phone rang at 3 in the morning, shattering Theo's sleep like a judge's gavel. "Theo, the merger is off. We can't work with someone like you," his biggest client snarled before hanging up, and in that single heartbeat, Theo knew the carefully constructed closet he had lived in for 15 years as a gay man in New York's cutthroat corporate world had just been blown wide open. He sat up in his sleek Manhattan apartment, sweat already cooling on his skin, the city lights outside his floor-to-ceiling windows mocking him with their indifferent glow. At 34, Theo had built a reputation as the go-to lawyer for billion-dollar acquisitions at Harrington and Klein, yet one leaked photo from a discreet fundraiser 2 weeks earlier had been enough. Someone had snapped him laughing too closely with a male colleague, and the rumor mill had done the rest. His client, a conservative family-owned conglomerate, wanted nothing to do with the scandal. By sunrise, Theo was in his corner office, staring at the empty conference table where the merger documents should have been signed. His assistant quietly closed the door and slid a resignation letter across the polished walnut. "They're pulling the entire portfolio, Theo. The partners are meeting in an hour." He nodded numbly, his mind racing through every client dinner, every charity gala, every weekend he had spent alone to keep his personal life invisible. His parents back in Chicago still asked when he would bring home a nice girl, settle down, give them grandchildren. They had no idea their only son had known since college that girls were never going to be part of his future. Now the truth was about to explode across every industry newsletter, and he could already feel the walls closing in. That afternoon, he wandered into a quiet bar in Midtown, not his usual spot, just somewhere the noise of the city might drown out the panic. The bartender slid him a whiskey neat, and Theo stared into the amber liquid, wondering how many years of his life he had spent hiding. Then a voice cut through the low hum of conversation. "Rough day." Theo looked up and met the steady gaze of a man about his age with light brown hair neatly styled and eyes the color of storm clouds. Isaiah Rivera introduced himself as the lead counsel for the very company Theo's client had been trying to acquire. Small world. Isaiah ordered a beer, and they talked shop. At first, the failed merger, the legal loopholes, the ruthless tactics both sides had prepared. But as the afternoon slipped into evening, the conversation drifted. Isaiah spoke about growing up in California with immigrant parents who still struggled with the idea of their son never marrying a woman. Theo found himself opening up in ways he never had with anyone at the firm, revealing the constant weight of pretending, the fear that one wrong glance could end everything he had built. They parted with a handshake that lingered a second too long, and Theo walked home feeling something he hadn't felt in years: genuine connection. But the next morning, the partners at Harrington and Klein delivered the verdict. Suspended pending investigation. His office was already being packed. Theo stood on the sidewalk with a cardboard box under one arm, watching yellow taxis blur past, and wondered if this was the end of the line. Little did he know that the rival he had just met would soon become the only person willing to give him a second chance, and the only man who could make him question whether hiding was ever worth it. The city kept moving, but for the first time in years, Theo felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, ready to pull him into a future he had never dared to imagine. Isaiah's call came 3 days later. "I heard what happened. My firm is representing the target company now, and we need someone who knows the other side inside out." Interested, Theo stared at the phone in his temporary apartment, the one he had sublet after the partners asked him to clear his desk. Pride warred with desperation. Taking the job meant going up against his former client, the same people who had just destroyed his reputation. It also meant working side by side with Isaiah every day. He accepted before he could talk himself out of it. The next morning, he walked into Rivera and Associates on the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Hudson. Isaiah greeted him with a firm handshake and a quiet smile that made Theo's chest tighten. "Welcome to the other side, counselor." The case was high stakes, a hostile takeover defense that could save the smaller tech firm from being swallowed whole. Theo threw himself into the work, poring over contracts, drafting motions, staying late, while the rest of the team went home. As the weeks passed, the professional distance between them began to erode. Late-night strategy sessions turned into shared takeout dinners. Isaiah listened when Theo finally admitted the full story: the photo the clients discussed, the way his own firm had dropped him without a fight. "You didn't deserve that," Isaiah said one night as they stood on the office balcony, the river glittering below. "Nobody should have to hide who they are to keep their job." Theo wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, sharp and familiar. His mother had called that morning, voice trembling, asking why the family group chat was suddenly full of questions about his lifestyle. He had hung up before he could say the words out loud. Isaiah seemed to sense the turmoil and changed the subject to lighter things: childhood stories, favorite books, the ridiculous number of coffee shops in Manhattan. Slowly, Theo felt the walls he had built over 15 years begin to crack. But cracks let in light, and also danger. One evening, after a particularly grueling deposition, Isaiah suggested they grab dinner at a small Italian place a few blocks away. Over pasta and red wine, the conversation turned personal again. Isaiah spoke about his last relationship, how it had ended because his partner couldn't handle the secrecy required in their conservative professional circle. Theo found himself reaching across the table, brushing Isaiah's hand without thinking. The touch was brief but electric. When they stepped outside, the night air cool against their skin, Isaiah paused under a street lamp. "I like spending time with you, Theo. More than I probably should right now." Theo's heart hammered. He wanted to say the same, but the old panic rose up, the voice whispering that this could ruin everything all over again. He mumbled something about keeping things professional and walked away alone, the city lights blurring through sudden tears he refused to let fall. The next morning, a new crisis hit. An anonymous tip reached the original client claiming Theo had been feeding inside information to the opposition. It was a lie, but the damage was instant. Court documents were filed accusing him of unethical conduct. Isaiah stood by him in the emergency meeting, his voice steady as he defended Theo's integrity. "This is retaliation, pure and simple," he told the judge later that day. Watching Isaiah fight for him, Theo felt a warmth he had never allowed himself to feel before. Yet the misunderstanding lingered. One of the junior associates whispered that maybe Theo was only here to sabotage from within. The rumor spread quietly through the office, and for the first time Isaiah looked at him with a flicker of doubt. Theo wanted to explain, to confess everything, but the words stuck in his throat. The case was heating up, and so was the tension between them, pulling them closer even as invisible barriers threatened to tear them apart. The boardroom confrontation arrived sooner than anyone expected. Theo and Isaiah stood shoulder to shoulder, presenting their defense against the hostile takeover. Across the long mahogany table sat representatives from the original client, the same men who had fired Theo weeks earlier. Their lead attorney smirked when he saw Theo. "Interesting choice of counsel," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Isaiah's hand brushed Theo's under the table, a silent show of support that steadied him. Theo delivered his arguments with precision, citing precedents, dismantling the merger terms one by one. By the end of the day, the judge had granted a temporary injunction, buying the smaller company time. The team celebrated with champagne in the conference room, but Theo slipped away to the balcony, needing air. Isaiah followed. "You were brilliant in there," he said quietly. The city hummed below them, and for a moment the world felt possible. That night they finally talked. Back at Isaiah's apartment, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, Theo let the words spill out: the years of hiding, the fear of disappointing his parents, the constant calculation of every glance, every conversation. Isaiah listened without interruption, then pulled him into a gentle embrace. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Their first kiss was tentative, careful, as if both were afraid the moment might shatter. When they drew apart, Theo felt lighter than he had in decades. Yet the victory was short-lived. The next morning, a tabloid blog ran a blurry photo from the Italian restaurant, the one where their hands had touched. The headline screamed, "Disgraced lawyer cozying up to rival counsel." Isaiah's conservative parents saw it first. His father called, demanding explanations, threatening to cut ties. Theo's own mother left a tearful voicemail asking if the rumors were true. The pressure mounted from every direction. Worse, a betrayal came from within. Theo's former best friend at Harrington and Klein, the one he had trusted with small confidences over the years, had been the source of the original leak. Confronted over the phone, the friend admitted it had been for your own good, to force Theo out of the closet before it ruined the firm's reputation. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Theo sat on the edge of Isaiah's couch, staring at the floor, while Isaiah paced, making calls, trying to contain the media fallout. "We'll fight this," Isaiah promised, but the doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. The case was now entangled with their personal lives, and the opposing side was using every dirty tactic to discredit them both. In a late-night strategy session, Isaiah asked the question Theo had been dreading. Are you using me to get back at them, Theo? Be honest. The misunderstanding cut deep. Theo shook his head, words failing him, until he finally spoke the truth he had buried for so long. I've never wanted anything more than I want this with you. But I understand if it's too much. Isaiah didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the room, took Theo's face in his hands, and kissed him again, this time with a quiet certainty that said more than words ever could. Yet the sacrifice was coming. To protect Isaiah from further scandal, Theo drafted a letter offering to step down from the case. He couldn't bear the thought of dragging the man he was falling for through the mud. Isaiah found the draft on the printer the next morning and tore it up without a word. We finished this together, he said, his voice fierce. The decision bound them tighter, but the cost was already climbing. Family messages piled up, unanswered board meetings grew hostile, and the media circled like sharks. Still, in the quiet moments between crises, Theo began to see a different future, one where he didn't have to choose between love and success. The turning point was approaching, and neither of them could turn back now. The deposition room felt smaller than usual. Theo sat across from his former client's executives, watching their lawyers twist every question into an accusation of betrayal. Isaiah sat beside him, taking notes, his knee occasionally brushing Theo's, under the table, a silent anchor. When the opposing counsel asked about their personal relationship, Theo felt the room tilt. Isaiah answered first, calm and professional. Our personal lives have no bearing on the merits of this case. The judge agreed, but the damage was done. Whispers followed them into the hallway. Back at the office, the team was divided, some supportive, others openly hostile. One associate resigned, citing moral conflicts, and Theo knew the firm's reputation was bleeding. Isaiah pulled him into his office after hours and closed the blinds. We're not backing down, he said, but his voice carried the strain of late nights and family ultimatums. That weekend they escaped to a small cabin upstate, lent by a sympathetic colleague. No phones, no emails, just the two of them and the quiet woods. For the first time, Theo spoke openly about the night he had come out to himself at 19, terrified, in a college dorm. Isaiah shared stories of his own struggles growing up in a traditional household where being gay was never discussed. They cooked simple meals, walked the trails, and lay awake talking until dawn. In those hours, the bond deepened into something solid and real. Theo realized he was falling in love not just with Isaiah, but with the version of himself that Isaiah saw, the man who was brave enough to fight for what mattered. Yet the outside world refused to stay away. A text from Theo's mother arrived at midnight. We love you, but we need time to understand. Isaiah's father left a voicemail demanding he choose between the family business and this lifestyle. The messages sat heavy between them even as they held each other through the night. Monday brought the board meeting that would decide everything. The target company's shareholders gathered to vote on whether to accept a revised acquisition offer or fight on. Theo and Isaiah presented a counter-strategy, one that would allow the smaller firm to emerge stronger, independent. As Theo spoke, he felt the weight of every sacrifice, the lost job, the strained family ties, the risk he was taking with his heart. Isaiah watched him with quiet pride, and when the vote came in their favor, the room erupted in applause. They had done it. The rival had been taken over, not through destruction, but through smart legal maneuvering that preserved jobs and created new opportunities. Theo had effectively helped the opponent claim victory over his former client. In the celebration, Isaiah pulled him aside in the empty hallway. You saved us all today, he whispered. Their kiss was urgent, full of relief and promise, but the real test was still coming. The secret that had started everything finally surfaced. An ex-boyfriend of Theo's from years ago sold a story to a gossip site, complete with old messages and photos. The article painted Theo as reckless, unprofessional, and Isaiah as his latest conquest. The backlash was immediate. Sponsors pulled funding from the firm, clients canceled meetings. Isaiah's family cut off communication entirely. Theo stood in Isaiah's apartment, watching the news ticker scroll across the television, feeling the old shame rise like bile. I never meant for any of this to touch you, he said, voice breaking. Isaiah turned off the TV and took his hands. None of this is your fault. We face it together or we don't face it at all. The decision to go public with their relationship was mutual. They released a joint statement through the firm acknowledging their relationship and affirming their commitment to professional integrity. The move was risky, but it was honest, and for the first time Theo felt free. The media storm lasted 10 days. Headlines shifted from scandal to reluctant respect as other lawyers and allies began speaking out about the pressures faced by LGBTQ professionals in corporate America. Support poured in from unexpected places, former colleagues, clients who had stayed silent before. Theo's parents flew in from Chicago unannounced. The reunion in Isaiah's living room was awkward, tearful, and ultimately healing. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering, "We just want you to be happy." His father shook Isaiah's hand with a gruff, "Take care of my son." Isaiah's own family remained distant, but his sister reached out privately, promising to work on their parents. The small victories felt monumental. With the case won and the firm stabilized, Theo and Isaiah faced a new chapter.